Something unexplainable happened when I decided to trust the quantum field. I know it sounds strange, but in that moment everything changed. Not because I did something new, but because I finally let go of control. There was no dramatic decision, no clear plan. Just a quiet internal shift where I stopped trying to force the next step. And in that pause, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief without reason. It made me wonder if you've ever felt this too. Have you ever felt like the universe responds when you finally stop trying to control everything? What if this isn't just a spiritual coincidence, but something even physics is starting to explain? Because when control loosened, life didn't collapse like I feared. It adjusted, subtly, almost intelligently. And what stayed with me wasn't an answer, but a deeper question. What if trust isn't passive at all, but an active signal we send to reality? One that changes how everything responds from that moment on. Most people never access this power, not because they lack belief, discipline, or intelligence. Many of them read the books, watch the lectures, meditate in silence, and speak the right language. From the outside, they look committed. From the inside, something subtle keeps them locked out. The barrier is not a lack of faith. It is the way fear quietly negotiates with their belief. Fear is patient. It doesn't scream. It whispers conditions. It allows spirituality as long as it doesn't threaten identity, habits, or the need to feel safe. So people trust the quantum field, but only while keeping one hand firmly on the steering wheel. They pray, but with backup plans. They visualize abundance, but rehearse disappointment. They talk about surrender, but rehearse control. And the field feels that immediately. Most people don't notice this because fear often disguises itself as responsibility, realism, or wisdom. It says, be open, but not naive. It says, trust, but don't let go completely. It says, believe, but prepare for the worst. These sound reasonable. They even sound mature, but they create a split signal. The quantum field does not respond to what you claim to believe. It responds to the coherence between what you think, what you feel, and how your body prepares for the next moment. When those layers are not aligned, the signal becomes noisy, and noise weakens resonance. Here is something simple you can notice right now. Think about something you deeply want. Not something dramatic, just something meaningful. As you hold it in mind, notice your breath. Does it soften or does it tighten? Notice your chest. Does it open or does it brace? Many people are surprised to feel a subtle contraction. That contraction is not a moral failure. It is conditioning. It is the body remembering past disappointment and quietly saying, don't trust too much. This is why studying spirituality alone doesn't unlock the field. Knowledge without inner safety does not change frequency. You can understand every concept and still broadcast fear. The field is not impressed by insight. It mirrors state. Another reason people stay locked out is that they treat the quantum field like a distant force they must convince. They perform techniques as if trying to persuade reality to cooperate. Visualization becomes effortful. Affirmations become rehearsed arguments. Meditation becomes a task to achieve an outcome. All of this reinforces a hidden belief. I am separate from what I want, and I must reach it. Separation is a low coherence signal. When you feel separate, the nervous system stays vigilant. Vigilance keeps the body in a subtle stress response, and stress collapses the very openness required for the field to respond in unexpected ways. The paradox is painful. The harder someone tries to access the field, the more they confirm the inner message that something is missing. There is also an unspoken attachment to struggle. For many people, effort feels virtuous, control feels safe, letting go feels irresponsible. So they unconsciously equate tension with progress. When nothing feels tense, they assume nothing is happening. But the quantum field doesn't move through force. It moves through coherence. This is where many spiritual seekers get confused. They expect alignment to feel powerful, dramatic, or emotionally intense. Instead, true alignment often feels ordinary, quiet, grounded, almost boring. And because it lacks fireworks, people doubt it. They abandon it too quickly and return to effort, hoping intensity will produce results. Another invisible block is identity. If the field were to truly respond, Some versions of the self would no longer make sense. The victim identity, the overachiever, the one who survives by anticipating loss. These identities are familiar. They come with stories, roles, and even social validation. Letting them dissolve feels like a small death. So people unconsciously sabotage alignment just enough to stay familiar. They say they want change, but their inner world is organized around predictability. And predictability is not resonance, it is repetition. There is also the issue of timing. Many people expect the field to respond immediately in visible ways. When it doesn't, they conclude nothing is happening. But the first response is rarely external. It usually begins as an internal reorganization. Old emotional patterns surface. Old doubts get louder. The system recalibrates. Without understanding this, people retreat. They think alignment failed, when in reality it just began. The deepest trap, though, is subtle dishonesty with oneself. Not lying in words, but in sensation. Saying, "I trust," while the body prepares for impact. Saying, "I'm open," while scanning for threats. Saying, "I've surrendered," while checking outcomes every few minutes. This internal mismatch is what keeps the field at a distance. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The field is already responding, always. The question is not whether it listens. The question is what signal you are actually sending beneath your thoughts. This brings us to something most people never examine, their inner state. Not their intentions, not their goals, their baseline emotional climate. The quiet frequency they return to when nothing is happening, because that state, not desire, is what the field reflects. Once this is seen, the focus naturally shifts, away from wanting, away from forcing, towards something more subtle and far more powerful, the quality of the inner state itself. Most people believe the quantum field responds to what they want. They think desire is the signal. Ask clearly enough, visualize long enough, repeat the intention enough times, and reality should rearrange itself. This idea sounds logical, but it quietly misses how the field actually works. Desire is noisy. Two people can want the same thing with equal intensity and receive completely different outcomes. One feels supported by life, the other feels blocked. The difference is not effort. It is not worthiness. It is the inner state from which the desire is coming. The field does not respond to words, images, or even intentions the way the mind imagines. It responds to coherence, to the emotional and physiological state that sits underneath the desire, shaping it before it ever becomes a thought. You can want abundance while feeling unsafe. You can want love while bracing for abandonment. You can want freedom while being addicted to control. In those moments, desire becomes a surface signal layered on top of a deeper frequency. And the deeper frequency always wins. This is why people feel confused. They say, "I was clear about what I wanted." But clarity of thought does not cancel incoherence of state. The body is not fooled by positive language. It responds to what feels real. If the nervous system is preparing for loss, the field receives that preparation, not the affirmation spoken on top of it. Think about how a mirror works. You don't change your reflection by telling it to smile. You change your face. Desire is often like talking to the mirror. Inner state is the face itself. Here is something subtle that happens when desire leads the process. The moment you want something badly, the mind begins to track distance. How far away it feels, how long it might take, what could go wrong. Even hope contains tension when it is mixed with waiting. That tension carries information. It tells the field, "This is not here yet." The field agrees, not because it is cruel, but because it is precise. It reflects the relationship you have with the present moment. If your inner state is organized around lack, even a hopeful lack, the reflection will match that organization. This doesn't mean desire is wrong. It means desire is incomplete information. Inner state is slower, quieter, harder to fake. It shows up in how you breathe when no one is watching, in how your body responds to uncertainty, in whether your attention naturally relaxes or tightens when you imagine possibility. These signals are constant. They don't turn off when you stop visualizing. Many people unintentionally train themselves to stay in a state of wanting. They rehearse longing. They revisit the future again and again, hoping to feel better now. But wanting is a posture, and the posture says, not yet. The quantum field doesn't interpret this as motivation, it interprets it as structure. There is another layer most people overlook. Desire often comes from the mind, while inner state lives in the body. The body moves slower than thought. It learns through repetition and safety, not ideas. So someone can intellectually believe everything is possible, while their body still lives as if danger is near. In that mismatch, the body leads. This is why people experience moments where things suddenly flow after they stop trying. It's not that the desire disappeared, it's that the inner state softened, the body stopped bracing, the signal became clean. Notice how different it feels to imagine receiving something versus chasing it. Receiving has weight, it has stillness, chasing has urgency. The field responds to the weight, not the urgency. This also explains why forcing gratitude rarely works. Saying I'm grateful while feeling tense doesn't shift the field, but feeling a single genuine moment of ease can. The field doesn't need long practices, it needs honest states. And honesty here doesn't mean positivity, it means congruence. Feeling sad and allowing it fully is often more coherent than pretending to feel joyful. The field responds to what is real, not what is preferred. When people hear this, some feel discouraged. They think, so I have to fix my inner state before anything can change. That framing is still control. Inner state is not something you dominate, it is something you listen to. As soon as you start noticing state instead of chasing desire, something shifts. You become curious instead of demanding. You begin to sense how often your body tightens without permission, how often your breath shortens when you think about the future. These observations are not passive, they are adjustments. Awareness itself changes frequency. This is where the misunderstanding deepens. People assume alignment means feeling good all the time, but alignment is not about pleasure, it's about coherence. A calm sadness is more aligned than anxious excitement. A grounded uncertainty is more powerful than forced certainty. The field responds to the quality of presence you bring to each moment, not the picture you hold in your mind. Desire is a direction. Inner state is the vehicle. And many people are trying to drive forward with the brakes on, wondering why nothing moves. As attention shifts inward, another uncomfortable realization often appears. Some desires exist to avoid feeling something: loneliness, meaninglessness, fear. When the inner state begins to settle, those desires change shape. Some fade, others deepen, and this can feel disorienting. Because when the field starts responding to your state instead of your wanting, it doesn't always give you what you asked for. It gives you what matches who you are becoming. This is where people often think they are using the field, but something still feels off. They sense movement, but also distortion, effort without resonance, practice without embodiment. And that quiet mismatch is exactly where the next misunderstanding begins. There is a mistake so quiet that almost no one notices it while it's happening. It doesn't feel like failure, it feels like progress. You meditate, you visualize, you repeat phrases that sound aligned. On the surface, everything looks right, and yet nothing truly shifts. This is where many people get stuck for years. The mistake is confusing mental activity with inner alignment. The mind is very good at simulation. It can rehearse futures, imagine emotions, and create convincing inner movies. When people say they are using the field, most of the time they are doing this, thinking about change instead of becoming available for it. The imagination is active, but the inner state remains untouched. And because imagination feels vivid, it creates the illusion of movement. The body tells a different story. You can visualize abundance while your stomach stays tight. You can imagine love while your shoulders remain lifted in defense. You can repeat calm words while your breath stays shallow. These signals matter more than the picture in your head. The field reads the body first. This is why the mistake stays silent. The mind feels busy, so it assumes something is happening. But the field doesn't respond to mental rehearsal. It responds to embodied signals. And when those signals don't change, the reflection doesn't either. Many people unknowingly turn spiritual practice into a form of mental control. They use visualization to override discomfort instead of listening to it. They use affirmations to drown out fear instead of allowing it to move. Over time, this creates a split. The conscious mind performs alignment, while the deeper system stays exactly the same. That split is imagination without resonance. There is another layer to this mistake. When practices are done to get rid of the present moment, they reinforce resistance. If you visualize a better future because now feels unbearable, the signal you send is not hope. It is rejection of what is, and the field reflects that rejection back as delay or friction. This doesn't mean you should like your current circumstances. It means your inner posture toward them matters. The field responds to relationship, not preference. Notice how often people check results. Is it working yet? Did I do it right? Why hasn't anything changed? These questions seem harmless, but they reveal the state underneath. Monitoring is a form of mistrust. It tells the field, I don't feel safe unless I see proof. Proof-seeking keeps the nervous system alert. Alertness collapses coherence. Another sign of this silent mistake is emotional bypassing. People skip over uncomfortable sensations and rush toward elevated feelings. But the body doesn't skip steps. When ignored, tension doesn't disappear, it goes underground. And underground tension still broadcasts. The quantum field does not reward intensity, it responds to sincerity. A single honest moment of presence has more signal than an hour of forced positivity. There is also the habit of copying states instead of cultivating them. People try to feel how they think an aligned person should feel. Calm, confident, detached. But borrowed states don't last. The body knows when an emotion is manufactured. It responds with subtle resistance, and the signal fragments again. True alignment feels personal, sometimes messy, sometimes quiet, often unspectacular. The imagination wants fireworks. The field prefers stability. This is why so many people say, I did everything right and nothing happened. What they really did was everything mentally. But the inner environment stayed the same. The field mirrored that consistency perfectly. There is a gentle way to notice if you're imagining instead of aligning. After a practice, ask yourself how your body feels toward the unknown, not excited, not hopeful, but open or closed, relaxed or guarded, willing or braced. These qualities are the language the field understands. When the mistake is seen, something changes naturally. Effort drops, curiosity increases. Instead of asking, how do I make this work? The attention shifts to, what is my system doing right now? That question alone begins to alter state. This is also where frustration often rises. People realize they've been performing alignment rather than living it. That realization can sting. But it's also a turning point, because once imagination is no longer mistaken for resonance, the body becomes the focus, and the body never lies. As attention sinks out of the head and into sensation, new things become noticeable. Subtle warmth, a deeper breath, a moment where the chest softens without effort. These are not dramatic experiences, but they are real shifts in signal. And when the signal changes at the level of the body, the field responds differently, not immediately with outcomes, but with feedback, synchronicities, emotional releases, temporary instability, a sense that something old is loosening. These are signs that imagination is giving way to embodiment. This is where many people feel uneasy, because embodiment removes the illusion of control. You can imagine safely. You can embody only honestly. And as this honesty deepens, something else starts to happen. The body itself begins to reorganize. Brain rhythms shift, heart patterns change. The system moves toward coherence without being forced. That movement doesn't feel mystical, it feels physiological. And it's there in those subtle bodily shifts that the next layer of the field begins to reveal itself. When true alignment happens, it doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It shows up quietly, through the body, before the mind has language for it. Most people expect alignment with the quantum field to feel like excitement or certainty. What actually appears first is something far more subtle: regulation. The body shifts out of constant alert. For many people, The nervous system lives slightly ahead of the present moment. It anticipates, prepares, braces. Even during rest, there is a background tension, like an engine idling too fast. When alignment begins, that background noise starts to soften, not all at once, not permanently, but enough to be noticeable if you're paying attention. Breathing changes before thoughts do. The inhale stops reaching upward into the chest and begins to drop lower. The exhale lengthens without effort. There is often a spontaneous sigh, not from relief, but from release. The body is recalibrating its sense of safety. This matters more than it sounds. A regulated body sends a very different signal into the field than a vigilant one. Vigilance says something is wrong or about to be. Regulation says this moment is survivable. The field mirrors that distinction precisely. At the same time, the heart rhythm begins to stabilize. You don't feel your heart slowing dramatically, but you feel less internal rushing. Thoughts still come, but they don't pile on top of each other. There is more space between them. This is not emptiness, it's coherence. In coherent states, the brain stops oscillating wildly between anticipation and memory. Attention becomes steadier. You're less pulled into the future and less stuck in the past. This is why people often describe alignment as feeling present, even if nothing externally has changed. The body also starts conserving energy. When you're misaligned, a surprising amount of energy is spent managing inner conflict, suppressing emotions, rehearsing conversations, monitoring outcomes. When alignment deepens, those internal tasks lose urgency. Fatigue sometimes appears here, not because something is wrong, but because the body finally stops overcompensating. This is one of the first places people misunderstand what's happening. They think alignment should feel energizing right away. Sometimes it does. Often it doesn't. Often it feels like slowing down, like needing rest, like a system catching up after years of tension. Another shift happens in the gut. Decisions begin to feel clearer, not because answers appear, but because noise drops. You don't feel compelled to decide everything immediately. Uncertainty becomes more tolerable. This is a key sign of alignment that almost no one talks about. When the body is aligned, it can hold not knowing without panic. Muscle tone changes too. The jaw unclenches, the shoulders lower slightly, the forehead softens. These are not dramatic movements. They're small permissions, and each one slightly alters the signal being broadcast. This is where science quietly meets experience. Coherence between heart, brain, and nervous system creates measurable changes. But you don't need instruments to notice them. You feel less reactive, less defensive, less compelled to prove or protect something. And with that, your relationship to the environment shifts. You listen differently. You notice more. Synchronicities don't feel magical. They feel logical, as if you finally tuned into a frequency that was already there. Importantly, alignment does not make emotions disappear. Sadness can still arise. Fear can still pass through. The difference is that emotions move instead of getting stuck. They don't hijack the system. The body processes them and returns to baseline more easily. This fluidity is a sign the field is being met with a clean signal. Another unexpected change is how effort feels. You still act. You still make choices. But action no longer feels like pushing against resistance. It feels more like responding. Less friction, less internal debate. You find yourself doing things without the familiar drain. This doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It means the body is no longer fighting itself while engaging with life. One of the clearest markers of alignment is a change in how you relate to time. Urgency fades. You're still aware of deadlines, but they don't dominate your inner world. Patience stops feeling like something you force and starts feeling like something that happens naturally. This is also where expectations begin to loosen. Not because you lower standards, but because the need for immediate outcomes weakens. The body trusts process more than prediction. And here is where many people become uneasy. As alignment stabilizes, the body stops supporting old patterns. Habits built on stress lose their fuel. Relationships based on tension feel uncomfortable. Situations that once felt normal begin to feel off. This is not a punishment, it's feedback. The system is reorganizing. When this happens, people often think something is going wrong. They feel disoriented, less driven in familiar ways. Old motivations don't work anymore, but new ones haven't fully formed. This in-between state can feel worse than the old one, which is why alignment is often followed by discomfort. The body has changed frequency, but the external world hasn't caught up yet. Old structures still expect the old version of you to respond, and the mismatch creates tension. This is the moment where many people panic and try to force things back to normal. They reintroduce control. They abandon alignment. They mistake recalibration for regression. But this uneasy phase is not a mistake. It's a sign, a signal that the body has shifted first. And when the body shifts first, reality usually responds second, not immediately, and rarely in the way the mind expects. Before flow appears, instability often does. Before clarity, confusion. Before expansion, contraction. This is the part almost no one warns you about, and it's the part that determines whether alignment deepens or collapses back into imagination. The first sign that the field is responding rarely feels like relief. It feels like friction. Something shifts, and instead of things getting smoother, they become strangely uncomfortable. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just enough to make you question whether you've done something wrong. This is where many people stop trusting the process. When the inner state changes before the outer world does, a gap appears. Your body has moved into a new frequency, but your environment is still organized around the old one. The result is tension. Familiar patterns start to feel heavy. Conversations that once flowed feel off. Routines lose their grip. Motivation changes shape. This discomfort is not a failure, it's feedback. The nervous system has updated its settings, but reality hasn't recalibrated yet. And the body notices the mismatch immediately. There can be restlessness without a clear reason, a subtle sadness, irritability that doesn't quite belong to anything specific, or a strange emptiness where old desires used to live. People often misread this as regression. They think alignment should feel like certainty, clarity, or peace, but peace usually comes later. First comes dissonance. Imagine changing the tuning of an instrument while the orchestra keeps playing the same song. For a moment, everything sounds wrong. Not because the instrument is broken, but because it no longer matches what surrounds it. This is the moment the field often responds by destabilizing what no longer fits. Jobs feel tighter. Relationships reveal cracks. Old coping strategies stop working. The body no longer gets the same relief from distraction, control, or overthinking. What once numbed discomfort now amplifies it. This can feel unfair. You did the inner work. You aligned. Why does life feel harder? Because alignment removes anesthesia. When the system becomes more coherent, it becomes more sensitive. You feel what you used to ignore. You notice what you used to tolerate. This sensitivity is not weakness, it's accuracy. The field responds by bringing incongruence into awareness. Another uncomfortable sign is loss of certainty. The old story about who you are and where you're going begins to dissolve. Not replaced yet, just loosened. The mind dislikes this intensely. It wants labels, timelines, assurance, but alignment often opens a period where answers go quiet. This silence is not emptiness, it's space, and space can feel threatening when you're used to noise. There is also a temptation to rush through this phase, to force decisions, to grab onto something solid. People change jobs impulsively, end relationships abruptly, or double down on old habits just to escape the uncertainty. These reactions are understandable, but they usually prolong the discomfort rather than resolve it. The field doesn't rush, it reorganizes. Another sign that confuses people is the surfacing of old emotions, memories you thought you were done with, feelings you believed you had outgrown. They don't come back because you failed. They come back because the system is now stable enough to process them. Alignment creates capacity. What couldn't be felt before now asks to move. This can feel like going backward, but it's actually integration. The body is cleaning signal noise, letting go of residue that would interfere with resonance. During this time, external validation often decreases. Fewer compliments, less reassurance, less visible progress. This can trigger doubt. If this were working, wouldn't I see proof? But proof-seeking is part of the old pattern. The field is shifting the reference point inward. The uncomfortable truth is that the first response of the field often removes what you used to lean on, not to punish you, but to reveal what no longer matches your state. This can feel like loss before it feels like gain, and loss activates fear. Fear says, go back. It says, at least you knew who you were there. It says, this discomfort means danger. But discomfort here is not danger, it's transition. The body is between identities, between frequencies, between ways of relating to life. This is also when people are most tempted to take control again, to force outcomes, to overplan, to micromanage reality back into something familiar. Control promises relief, but it also reintroduces incoherence. Letting this phase unfold requires a different kind of trust. Not trust that everything will be perfect, but trust that instability can be informative, that confusion can be part of alignment, that discomfort doesn't automatically mean you're off track. One of the clearest signs you're in this phase is a heightened awareness of what drains you. Things that once felt neutral now feel exhausting. Obligations feel heavier. Noise feels louder. This isn't because you're weaker. It's because your system no longer wants to waste energy maintaining misalignment. And that creates friction with a world that expects you to stay the same. This is why the first response of the field is often internal and relational, not material. Before opportunities appear, tolerance for the wrong things disappears. Before doors open, others feel like they're closing, and it's deeply uncomfortable to sit in that gap. But this gap has a function. It prevents you from settling back into what you've outgrown. It keeps the signal clean long enough for reality to reorganize around it. The problem is not the discomfort. The problem is misunderstanding it. When discomfort is labeled as failure, people abandon alignment too soon. When it's recognized as feedback, they stay present long enough for the next shift to occur. Because after this phase, something else begins to happen. Control loosens further, expectations soften, and when the grip finally releases, the field responds again. But rarely in the way the mind has planned. Letting go of control is often described as a peaceful act. In reality, it can feel like stepping into free fall. Control is familiar. It gives shape to uncertainty. It creates the sense that if you think enough, plan enough, or prepare enough, you can stay ahead of loss. So when alignment deepens and control begins to loosen, the first sensation is rarely trust. It's exposure. The mind reacts quickly. It says, be careful. It says, don't get lazy. It says, if you stop managing everything, things will fall apart. These voices are not enemies. They are habits formed in moments when control once kept you safe. But the field does not respond to vigilance. It responds to availability. When control drops even slightly, space opens, and into that space reality begins to move. Not smoothly, not politely, often sideways. This is where expectations quietly collapse. Most people assume that if the field delivers, it will deliver upgrades, more money, better relationships, clear opportunities. But when control dissolves, the field often removes first. It subtracts before it adds. It interrupts patterns that no longer fit the state you've entered. That interruption can look like loss. A job ends, a relationship shifts, a plan you were attached to stops making sense. At first it feels like punishment, like the opposite of manifestation. But underneath, something precise is happening. The field is reorganizing conditions around a new signal. Control keeps outcomes predictable. Letting go invites coherence, not predictability. When you stop gripping the wheel, you also stop forcing direction. The field doesn't replace your control with comfort. It replaces it with intelligence. But intelligence doesn't explain itself in advance. This is why people often say, I asked for growth and everything fell apart. What actually fell apart was the structure that required you to stay the same. There is a moment in this phase where it feels like nothing is working. Effort no longer produces results. Old strategies fail. Even spiritual practices feel empty. This can trigger panic. The mind wants something to do, something to fix, something to manage. But that emptiness is not absence, it's clearance. The field can't deliver through a system that's over-constrained. Control tightens the channel, letting go widens it, but wide channels feel unstable at first, like walking on ground that hasn't hardened yet. Another unexpected part of this phase is that what arrives doesn't match the original desire. You asked for security, and instead you're given uncertainty. You asked for success, and instead you're given rest. You asked for connection, and instead you're given solitude. This is where trust is tested, because the field doesn't deliver what you think you want. It delivers what matches the state you've entered. And often, that state requires experiences that recalibrate identity before rewards can make sense. Take the example of control around worth. Many people want more because they don't feel enough. When that pattern loosens, the field may remove the chase before offering the result. Without the chase, the identity reorganizes, and only then can the outcome land without reinforcing lack. This is not linear. It doesn't feel efficient, but it is coherent. Letting go also reveals how much effort was being used to maintain illusions of stability, of certainty, of control over timing. When those illusions dissolve, there can be grief. Even if you asked for change, part of you mourns the familiar struggle. This grief is rarely acknowledged, but it's real. Another strange thing happens when control loosens. Decisions become fewer, but more consequential. You stop filling space with movement. You wait. And waiting feels unbearable to a mind trained on productivity. Yet in that waiting, signals become clearer. What once required analysis now shows up as a quiet yes or no in the body. This is not passivity, it's responsiveness. And responsiveness changes the way outcomes arrive. Instead of chasing opportunities, you notice invitations. Instead of forcing timing, you sense readiness. Instead of negotiating with reality, you cooperate with it. The cooperation is subtle, almost invisible, which is why many people miss it and assume nothing is happening. But beneath the surface, conditions are rearranging. Letting go of control also means letting go of how you think things should look. This can bruise the ego. You might receive something better than you imagined, but in a form that doesn't match your story. Or you might receive something humbling that strips away performance and reveals essence. The field is not concerned with your image of success. It is concerned with coherence. This is the point where people either surrender deeper or try to regain control. Those who grasp again often restore familiar patterns quickly. Life becomes predictable again, manageable, and quietly misaligned. Those who stay open a little longer notice something else emerging, a sense that life is moving them, not against them, but through them. Even when outcomes are uncomfortable, they feel meaningful. Even when things don't work out, they don't feel wasted. And slowly, the relationship with the field changes. It stops feeling like something you use. It starts feeling like something you reflect. And in that shift, another realization begins to form. One that reframes everything you thought this process was about. Many people approach the quantum field the way they were taught to approach desire. Make a wish, focus hard, and wait for reality to comply. Even when the language sounds spiritual, the expectation is transactional. Do the practice correctly and the universe will deliver a reward. This framing is comforting, but it quietly distorts what is actually happening. The field is not listening for requests. It is listening for consistency. A genie responds to commands. A mirror responds to presence. The quantum field behaves like the latter. It does not ask what you want. It reflects who you are being while you want it. And this difference changes everything. When people feel disappointed with the field, it's usually because they are negotiating with it. They imagine a deal. If I believe enough, if I let go enough, if I stay positive enough, then I'll get what I want. That mindset keeps the relationship external. You versus the universe. You asking, something answering. But the mirror doesn't negotiate. It doesn't argue. It doesn't delay out of cruelty. It simply shows you what stands in front of it. If your inner world is organized around pressure, the reflection contains pressure. If it's organized around absence, the reflection contains absence. If it's organized around wholeness, the reflection begins to show support in forms that match that wholeness. This is why some people feel like the field ignores them. It isn't ignoring them, it is being precise. The idea of the genie is appealing because it protects identity. You can stay the same and still hope for change. The mirror removes that comfort. It says, if you want a different reflection, something here has to shift, not in behavior alone, but in state. This is also why shortcuts don't work. You can't trick a mirror. You can't impress it. You can't distract it with techniques. It reflects what is stable, not what is performed. When this realization lands, it can feel sobering, even disappointing, because it means the work is more intimate than most people expected. It's not about commanding reality. It's about relating to yourself honestly enough that the reflection changes naturally. Another misunderstanding dissolves here. People think the mirror metaphor means blame. If everything is my state, then everything is my fault. That conclusion misses the point. A mirror doesn't accuse, it informs. It gives feedback without judgment. If you see exhaustion in the reflection, the mirror isn't shaming you. It's showing you depletion. If you see chaos, it's not punishing you. It's revealing incoherence. This information is useful, not moral. The field doesn't ask you to be perfect, it asks you to be real. This is where people begin to notice something subtle. When they stop asking the field to change things and start listening to what is being reflected, life becomes more conversational. Events feel less random. Challenges feel less personal. There is a sense of dialogue without words. You notice patterns instead of problems. A repeated obstacle stops feeling like bad luck and starts feeling like a message about state. A recurring frustration points to a recurring inner posture, not to fix, but to notice. And as noticing deepens, effort drops again. The mirror also explains why gratitude works when it's genuine and fails when it's forced. Forced gratitude is still a request. Genuine gratitude is a state. The mirror reflects the state immediately, often in small ways that are easy to miss if you're waiting for something dramatic. This is also why comparison weakens alignment. When attention is locked onto someone else's reflection, you lose contact with your own. The mirror can only respond to what stands directly before it. Presence matters more than aspiration. As this understanding settles, the relationship with desire changes. Desire becomes less of a demand and more of a compass. It points, but it doesn't pull. You can want without grasping, you can move without chasing, and in that shift, the question, how do I get the field to work for me, quietly transforms into something else. What is my state teaching me right now? That question doesn't create urgency. It creates clarity. The mirror also reveals something uncomfortable about control. Control tries to manage the reflection instead of the source. It adjusts lighting, angles, expressions, hoping the image will comply. Letting go of control means turning attention back toward the source itself. This is where humility enters the process, not as weakness but as accuracy. You realize the field isn't here to serve your preferences, it's here to maintain coherence. And coherence often leads somewhere deeper than the original wish. This reframing doesn't make life predictable, it makes it intelligible. You stop expecting the field to fix discomfort and start noticing how discomfort points to misalignment. You stop asking for signs and start recognizing feedback. You stop waiting for permission and start responding to what is already being shown. And something else begins to loosen as well, the need to need. When you understand the field as a mirror, you see that grasping distorts the image. Wanting too tightly creates ripples. Needing bends the reflection. The clearer the presence, the cleaner the mirror, which leads to a strange paradox that most people only encounter after a long struggle. When you stop needing the reflection to change, it often does. When you stop demanding outcomes, flow appears. When you stop chasing, movement begins. Not because you finally did it right, but because you finally stopped standing in the way. There is a moment in this process that feels almost backwards. After all the effort, awareness, discomfort, and internal shifts, the mind expects a final technique, one last adjustment, something to do. Instead, what appears is a strange simplicity. When the need drops, movement begins. At first, this feels wrong. Needing has been the engine for so long, needing clarity, needing security, needing proof. needing life to confirm that you're on the right path. Need feels active, alive. Without it, there is fear of stagnation, of passivity, of giving up. But what quietly reveals itself is that need was never neutral. It was a signal. Needing says, this moment is not enough. The field hears that immediately. When the inner system is organized around need, the body stays slightly tense. Attention stays forward, leaning into the future. Even hope carries strain. The system is always reaching, and reaching, no matter how refined, still communicates absence. When need begins to loosen, something unexpected happens. Not excitement, not certainty. Relief. A subtle relief that doesn't depend on outcomes. The body stops negotiating with the next moment. Breathing settles, muscles soften. The mind still has preferences, but they lose urgency. This is where flow quietly enters. Flow doesn't arrive because you earned it. It appears because resistance faded. Not resistance to life, but resistance to the present. When the system stops insisting that reality be different right now, it becomes responsive instead of reactive. This doesn't mean desire disappears. Desire changes temperature. It cools. It becomes directional instead of demanding. You can want without gripping. You can move without chasing. And that shift alters everything. People often misunderstand this phase. They think they've lost motivation, that something essential is missing. But what's missing is anxiety, not drive. What's missing is the pressure that used to push things forward. And pressure was never flow. Flow has a different quality. It's quieter, less dramatic, more efficient. Decisions happen with less debate. Opportunities feel more like invitations than prizes. Effort is still present, but it's cleaner. You do what's in front of you without trying to extract reassurance from it. The paradox is this: when you stop needing outcomes to validate you, outcomes become freer to arrive. Needing collapses space. It narrows perception. Everything becomes about timing, results, and comparison. When need drops, perception widens. You notice options you couldn't see before. You hear subtleties in conversations. You sense when to move and when to wait. Waiting stops feeling like failure. This is one of the clearest signs that flow has begun. Time feels different. Not faster, not slower, less heavy. You're not dragging yourself toward the future anymore. You're meeting moments as they come. Another unexpected change is how little force is required. Things still take work, but they don't take strain. There's a difference. Strain is effort plus resistance. Work without strain feels almost neutral. You act, then you stop. You don't carry the action with you afterward. When need dissolves, you also stop performing alignment. You're not trying to feel a certain way. You let yourself feel what's there. And because there's less internal pressure to manage experience, emotions pass through more easily. Joy comes and goes. Sadness comes and goes. Neither defines you. The field responds to this fluidity, not with instant rewards, but with coherence. Things begin to make sense in retrospect. Events connect. Timing reveals logic you couldn't have planned. You realize that much of what you thought was delay was actually preparation. This is also where comparison loses its grip. When you don't need your path to prove anything, someone else's success stops feeling threatening. Their reflection doesn't disturb yours. You stay oriented to your own signal, and that stability invites more movement. There is a subtle confidence that emerges here, not the loud kind, the quiet kind that doesn't need to announce itself. You trust yourself more, not because you have answers, but because you've learned you can respond. Responsiveness is the real power. When need drops, you stop asking, "Will this work?" and start asking, "What is needed now?" That question keeps you present, and presence keeps the signal clean. The strangest part of this paradox is that when you stop needing, you often receive more than you expected, not because you aimed better, but because you stopped narrowing what was allowed to arrive. The field had more room to work, but this can also feel destabilizing. Without need driving you, identity loosens again. You're no longer defined by striving or fixing. You exist more as participation than as pursuit. This is uncomfortable for a system trained to equate worth with effort. Yet in this space, life begins to meet you halfway, not as a reward, but as a response. You act, reality responds. Reality shifts, you adjust. There's dialogue instead of demand. And the more this rhythm settles, the clearer something becomes. Flow was never something you summoned. It was something that appeared when the interference stopped, which leaves one last quiet tension hanging in the air. If nothing needs to be forced and nothing needs to be proven, what actually matters now? The strange and liberating truth about the quantum field is this. It was never something outside of you to conquer, convince, or control. It was always responding to who you were being moment by moment. Not your words, not your wishes, your state. When you stop trying to use the field and start listening to it, life becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about reading signals. You don't lose direction. You gain clarity. You don't become passive, you become precise. Nothing here was about manifesting objects or chasing a better version of life. It was about remembering your own coherence. When you return to that, things move. Sometimes quietly, sometimes unexpectedly, but always honestly. If you stayed with this until the end, write this sentence in the comments. I stopped needing and something shifted. That lets me know you were really here. And if this resonated with you, watch one of the videos appearing on the screen now. If you want more content like this, that's the next place to go.